does have 2 Vindicates, which are pretty handy cards to have against blue-green Enchantress, as most Enchantress decks don't really have to worry about their Enchantress's presence being destroyed. But here, between Liliana and Vindicate, both Argothian Enchantress and Enchantress's presence are actually vulnerable.
So now, typically Enchantress versus a creature deck, that's going to favor the Enchantress player.
I agree, yeah. Chris's deck is pretty fast. It is not very difficult to combo or pseudo-combo on turn 4, and your opponent will rarely be able to rally back with anything from that point. So if Chris plays his spells carefully, it shouldn't be too difficult to evade the sorcery speed answers to his combo.
Alright, so Ybarra leads off on a Marsh Flats, no turn 1 play, and Chris also will have no turn 1 play. He just leads off on Forest. His deck is 2 islands, 7 forests, fairly resistant to wastelands,
yes,
which Ybarra is packing a full complement of. And at turn 2, double fetchline crack. If it's a Hymn to Turok, that's probably, I would think, what he's hoping for here, to try to somewhat mise Chris out of at least his early game.
I think Hymn to Turok and Dark Confidant are probably the two best cards he could have on turn 2. I'm not sure which is better. It might be the Hymn, just because if you get the Enchantress that Chris is relying on, sometimes he only has 1 or 2. It's pretty backbreaking.
Right. I mean, it seems like the benefit of the Confidant is that it draws more hymns.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And also that the Enchantress deck has basically no answer. This is
Tidehollow Sculler, it appears. He's debating between Hymn to Turok or Bob and Tidehollow Sculler. Okay. He's going to go with Dark Confidant.
Just fair.
Mean if there's a 2-mana Enchantress, that Chris will get to resolve it, which
worth
I think
noting
Argothian Enchantress does come down. So does that make you? You said you thought Bob was maybe the possibly the best 2-drop. So
sure.
With this turn of events, still true. I mean, it seems like Chris will be able to build back from whatever Bob does.
I agree that it's a problem. One of the things worth noting for Brett is, like, obviously off of Forest, he didn't really know what he was up against, and I think Bob is probably maybe more stock a turn 2 play against Forest. If you assume your opponent's playing, Maverick or something, you might want to wait until their hand's smaller to try and catch a Knight of the Reliquary.
So he puts Chris down to 18, and he's actually going for Stoneforge Mystic. I think after seeing the Enchantress, I would almost have to Sculler there.
I don't think you can afford to go for Stoneforge. Sculler is not especially awesome against Enchantress because of the Seal of Removals and even Seal of Primordium in Chris's main deck, but at the same time, Batterskull is close to irrelevant. So
Chris untaps is going to play Wild Growth, draw a card. Ybarra misses his 3rd land drop, which to me the problem with the Stoneforge Mystic play is it's committing next turn to also, so it's like over the next 2 turns, would you rather cast Stoneforge and Batterskull, or would you rather cast Sculler and Sculler? And I think for me the answer is Sculler and Sculler, because now Chris with 2 Enchantresses in play, he's off to the races.
He's going to fetch probably Tropical Island here, I imagine, now that he knows his opponent doesn't have a 3rd land, in order to cast a Seal of Removal.
Right.
And once he has the Seal of Removal in play, he'll be in fantastic shape, as I don't think Brett has relevant cards, really. Like, a Liliana will still leave him with 1 Enchantress. The Seal of Removal will keep any relevant card from being Scullered.
Absolutely.
He also has his Brick Carpet of Flowers in hand, to our general amusement. Carpet of Flowers is very powerful against blue decks, and it's one of the better enchantments you can have against them. But it does nothing against decks that are running islands.
Chris has Hymn to Turok in Ybarra's hand, but still nothing. Chris should be able to recoup from whatever he makes in discard.
Yep.
Brett does his 3rd land. Brett's gonna have to try to race here. That's not really a great proposition, but I think it's his only real play. Seal of Removal makes the Batterskull play pretty irrelevant. You wouldn't if by doing that you're committing way too many turns to getting a turn back into play. Kind of showing why Stoneforge Mystic is not very good in this matchup.
Very much.
Right, and it ends up being a Squire. So Chris will drop 214 on the attack.
That guy cantripped, give him a little credit.
But he bricked on his cantrip.
Yeah, that's fair.
Another Dark Confidant for Ybarra. A lot of cards. I'm not sure what the cards will accomplish him, though. You can't really... I mean, I don't think he's aware of just how combo-y his opponent is being.
No,
the Seal of Removal should be a tip-off, though. This isn't your average Enchantress deck.
I agree. It's very easy to just not be familiar, however. Like I said,
I'm not sure I would know what it's meant in a vacuum.
This deck is a relatively recent development in the Legacy metagame. I know I hadn't seen it until Gainsay made, I think, 5th in a premiere online with it, so... And of course, I immediately fell in love. But
Brett Ybarra with no way main deck to deal with the Argothian Enchantresses.
Other than the Lilianas, but obviously that's really inefficient at this stage.
Right.
Now that they're in play.
Carpet of Flowers doesn't do anything, but it's a 1-mana A call.
Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, or typically known just as A-Call.
The worst card in Chris's deck just became Ancestral Recall at
Right.
Sorcery Speed.
Well, with Triple Enchantress in play, the Enchantress player is usually just off to the races.
Elephant Grass will shut down Brett's offense rather handily.
Another Seal of Removal, I believe.
Oh, he's going to play the Cloud of Fairies. Just generate a little bit of value in order to keep going.
Is there any chance, can he, if he draws right, can he finish the combo this turn?
I don't think so, just because he does not have redundant Wild Growths or Cloud of Fairies in his hand, and he has to draw all of those things.
Right.
So I don't think he can do it with this particular mana, although it won't be very hard to do it on one of the following turns.
He can Seal of Removal his own Cloud of Fairies.
Yes, that is worth noting.
And he collects the whole set of Argothian Enchantresses. I think it's probably safer so you can play Elephant Grass for him just to do it next turn.
I agree.
It's black creatures can't attack you, and other creatures have to pay mana, right?
2 mana, yep, that's exactly correct.
Brett's creatures are black, so they just can't attack.
Well, Squire's going to get through.
That's true. Squire will get in. So we're gonna have to Chris discards down to 7. This game is all but over.
Yep.
0 for Wasteland.
Now, one of the things that I think is interesting to note for when we go to sideboarding is that Cloud of Fairies is basically Chris's win condition.
Right.
It is how he kills his opponent. It's how he generates enough mana to do basically anything of note. If you don't have a Cloud of Fairies, you are stuck with Eternal Witness / Dryad Arbor beatdown, unless you're boarding in the Jaces or Gaddock Teagues or other things.
So would it make sense in this deck to make a, I know this is a silly play, but boarding in things like, Engineered Plague set on Fairy?
Engineered Plague set on Fairy is kind of annoying, but it's actually pretty beatable because you still can trigger your Cloud of Fairies for the untap in order to start chaining your enchantments, and all you actually have to dig to is the Seal of Primordium in order to undo it.
All right. And in the main, we have 1 Seal of Primordium.
Yep. Because of the Eternal Witnesses in the main deck, you can actually use Words of Wind to reuse Seal of Primordium as many times as you need to.
Okay.
So it functions as a one-of answer. Another alternate kill for the deck is a Seal of Fire, which can kill the opponent in the same way, which, if you're wondering, takes exactly 8.5 minutes on Magic Online.
So you can't start that combo if you're too low on clock.
Right.
All right, and he grabs a card. I wasn't sure what card he grabbed. I'm not really sure it matters what card he grabbed. It's from Scourge.
It looks like Living Wish. Chris
Yeah,
is running
from
1
Scourge.
Living Wish, which can go get an Emrakul, Harmonic Sliver, or Gaddock Teague. The Emrakul is actually surprisingly relevant because if you go to time with this deck, you can actually win in extra turns this way, whereas beating someone to death with the Cloud of Fairies usually won't kill them in 5 turns.
Okay. And another Scholar coming out from Brett Ybarra. He's going to get all the cards in Chris Andersen's hand that are relevant, but the prison half of his deck showing through with the Elephant Grass. Chris has as much time as he needs.
Also interesting is that he can bounce his Cloud of Fairies and then cycle it to try and hit an enchantment if that becomes something he actually needs to do.
He's drawn Eternal Witness.
So he probably won't need to do that.
Yeah, he does have this better than A-Call in his hand. All right, Wild Growth. So for 0 mana, Chris will draw 4 cards.
And we are 1 mana away from you being able to use a Words of Wind to get all of our opponent's permanents.
And there's
a Words of Wind and a Wild Growth. I imagine we're going for it.
I would see no reason not to. Brett Ybarra is tapped out. All right, so we're going to get to see that combo we talked about in action. Chris is going to demonstrate the loop here. So first he needs to preserve his...
He needs another blue mana.
Yeah,
so
the Misty Rainforest will bring him down to 13. He's going to get a tropical island here.
Yep.
Or an island, doesn't matter, it makes blue. All right, so at this point then, he starts off by tapping the tropical island to add the 3rd Wild Growth to the forest, correct?
No, he has to not tap the tropical island because he has to cast Words of Wind and Cloud of Fairies this turn. So he has to tap Forest and add the Wild Growth onto the tropical island.
Okay.
Or he can cast Words of Wind off of Forest Island and then it's basically the same difference.
I see. All right, so we'll walk it through in a second here.
It looks like Chris is going to be doing this a slightly trickier way, or no, he's just going to cast his Words of Wind, draw 4 cards, and then I imagine...
So he's Words of Wind, floating a mana, so he has 4 draws on the stack. He may replace, and
he actually can't replace. Our Enchantress is triggered when you cast.
It's triggered on casting.
Yes.
Okay, so there is no replacing. He's going to draw 4 cards.
Yep. Now, what I would do here, since I've played my land, you can go ahead and Wild Growth now onto the island, but I would probably just Cloud of Fairies because you actually need to kind of control your deck. It can be difficult to pump enough mana into the enchantresses in order to avoid decking yourself while you're bouncing all those permanents.
All right, so he's using his extra land to wild growth the island, drawing 4. And our enchantress is not a May, correct?
It's not a May. So what you'll wind up doing a lot in these early stages is once you've gone actual full infinite, you can use the Words of Wind to bounce some of your enchantresses back as long as you have additional enchantments in your hand, because you don't need to bounce a 1-mana enchantment to continue the loop.
All right, so he's untapped his 2 lands. He now has 5 lands, 5 mana represented. Cloud of Fairies has resolved. As soon as he gets a draw, he needs a 1-mana enchantment.
Yep. Any 1-mana enchantment will do.
And I believe he has a Seal of Removal in his hand.
Yep. So he is going to, it looks like, start actually trying to generate mana.
All right, so
he's just going to use these dice to demonstrate iterations.
So we actually have the full loop here, right?
Yes.
All right,
right now
so
we have a
5
full
mana,
loop that
1
generates
blue
no
and
mana.
4 green. 1 green is spent casting using Elfin Grass. He's now down to 3 green and 1 blue, and he has 4 draw triggers on the stack. 4 draw triggers seems almost like too many.
It is too many. As I said, I think he's going to have to start bouncing an Argothian Enchantress. He's going to bounce these 2 first. On the next iteration, I wouldn't be surprised to
he's
see
bouncing,
something else.
so he's replacing, so he has 4 mana in his mana pool. He is now spending 1 of the green mana down to 3 mana to activate Words of Wind. And that means each player, so 2 mana, so he's spending 2 mana to activate Words of Wind twice. Both players have to bounce 2 permanents. He bounced Cloud of Fairies and the 1-mana enchantment. So now recast Cloud of Fairies back to 0 mana. We're at the same spot. 5 mana again. Elephant Grass into play. 4 mana. 4 draw triggers on the stack. Wait, you guys, he had to draw 2 extra. Clarifying.
Yeah, he didn't draw his 2, I believe, off of that first Elephant Grass.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
To be fair,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's probably a mistrigger here, but it doesn't really matter. I actually think it is technically advantageous for Chris to have forgotten this draw.
Right. Well, that's actually like less.
I'm aware that that's awkward.
It's awkward.
Yeah.
It doesn't really.
It makes the math easier.
All right. He's going to bounce those 2 again, so he has to draw 2 cards.
Yes.
So basically, right now, Chris, for the price of drawing 2 cards, he can make Brett bounce 2 permanents.
Right. That is correct.
And every time he will end up at the board state where Chris has his 2 lands untapped.
Yeah.
And the Cloud of Fairies in play.
Now, as soon as those 2 cards hit a Wild Growth, Chris will begin...
Brett's just going to scoop 2.
Yep, okay. As soon as those cards had found Chris another Wild Growth effect or Utopia Sprawl, he would have actually been able to generate a mana each turn and Living Wish for Emrakul. Chris is actually demonstrating this is what I would have done if you had not scooped as a point of courtesy to his opponent. Brett's got some sideboard for Chris. He is packing 1 Disenchant. That's got targets.
Yep, absolutely.
Zealous Persecution, which is an answer to Argothian Enchantress, especially good one in multiples.
Yeah, he'll probably side that in. He has a lot of cards that really aren't very good here. I think Stoneforge Mystic is particularly bad.
Yes. And he has 3 Surgical Extraction. And as I noted before, without Cloud of Fairies, Chris has a lot of trouble winning. It is possible to beat your opponent if you get your it's possible to beat your opponent whether you get Words of Wind or Cloud of Fairies Surgical Extraction. It's very hard both ways.
Because Chris Andersen is on the deck with such a linchpin card, and because Brett Ybarra has so many dead cards, Surgical makes for a great sideboard here.
Yeah.
Brett Ybarra will probably side out. Lingering Souls is also another card which is really quite miserable in the matchup.
Worth noting is that it is close to impossible to win if you get both Words of Wind and Cloud of Fairies Surgical Extracted, as your basic only outs are Eternal Witness Beatdown, which should never ever work here, or getting to 15 mana.
Right. And he doesn't have a Sarah Sanctum to do that?
No.
Okay.
His opponent also has Oblivion Rings, which I imagine will be coming in, so even actually hard casting an Emrakul is not necessarily going to win the game.
Yeah. Brett may deal 5 to himself, but yeah.
He might. I imagine we'll need a little help from an Eternal Witness or some Cloud of Fairies to get there. The Surgical Extraction issue also makes Cloud of Fairies much more awkward to cycle against black decks, or really against any deck with Snapcaster Mage. You can basically never afford to do that.
Alright, so from Chris Andersen's side, is there any changes which he really needs to make here? or that he would. It seems like he does have a wish board going on, so his sideboarding options are limited. Force of Will doesn't seem very good in the matchup.
No. I imagine he won't bring in too much. He may bring in the Crozen Grip. Maybe the Jace. Sphere of Safety is kind of an interesting card. He added that one. It's obviously new from Return to Ravnica, so it hasn't been tested in the deck much. Chris has said he hasn't played it yet, I believe, but that he thinks it is good and is interested in doing so. So I don't think I like it against this deck because his opponent's not especially aggressive and it's pretty costly. But it's an interesting option for those of you thinking it over. The disenchants are reasonable against Brett's deck. He knows that his opponent has Stoneforge Mystic, even if he thinks he might side it out. It does hit Tide Hollow Sculler. That card's definitely not coming out. Really, I think Chris is just going to want to rely on the fact that his deck naturally generates a lot of card advantage. As long as he can avoid getting Surgical Extracted or hemmed at the wrong time, he should be able to just get his opponent before any kind of significant pressure begins to mount.
So if you're Brett Ybarra, we determined that the 2-drop you wanted most, we thought probably is him to Turok still, or are we going with, like
in post-boarded games, I think it's definitely him,
yeah,
because it enhances your ability to Surgical Extract before Chris can do anything about it.
Right. The question is, if Brett Ybarra could pick his starting hand, what's he looking for?
Well, let's look. I imagine if I could actually just pick it,
maybe
I might want something that involves Cabal Therapy.
Okay.
Especially if I get to pick Chris's hand as well.
Within reason.
Within reason, I think you want to lead on a 1-drop disruption spell, followed probably by him, and then like Confidant and another disruption spell would be ideal.
So it's just the infinite discard draw.
Yeah.
Infinite discard plus Bob. Okay.
The Enchantress deck plays okay off the top, but not especially great, and as long as the Enchantress deck isn't actually killing you, your Surgical Extractions to effectively end their ability to win the game are live, especially if you manage to discard one of the combo pieces.
And Brett Ybarra on the plate. Chris Andersen up 1-0. Both these players low enough in the standings that this is not going to be. There will be no drawing into top 8 for the winner of this match.
I agree. One of the things I did neglect to mention was that this particular opponent, Brett Ybarra, is splashing into his Dead Gael deck red. He has a single Badlands, which enables him to play some Red Blast on the board. I imagine those are mostly for some of the Control and Miracle opponents here, but they could theoretically be live against Chris, as they do kill his 2 most important permanents.
Sensei's Divine Top starts out for Brett Ybarra. He's going to top on upkeep, and he does find a Thoughtseize and a Therapy.
And a Therapy.
Yeah, he's going to go, and he doesn't.
Turn 1 Plains makes that very awkward.
The question is whether or not he has to fetch to get his black source. If he has a black source in hand, whether or not he has to fetch to get it.
It looks like he has Wasteland and a bunch of black cards. So we're relying on this top, but I don't like this keep at all.
If that's true, I wouldn't have kept this hand.
Yeah. The thing is, the Enchantress deck thrives by getting to establish. So if you just let Chris start without pressuring him or making him discard,
he's going to draw the swamp.
Do we have a Thoughtseize already?
Okay, we have an Inquisition. All right.
That makes this hand a little more reasonable if we could assure ourselves.
Argothian Enchantress, that's almost certainly going to be the take.
Yeah.
So we have Wild Growth, Elephant Grass, 3 lands, Witness.
Now, that means Chris is probably going to spend turn 2 just playing a land and passing, with the plan being Eternal Witness back his Argothian Enchantress.
So he's not going to make the Wild Growth yet?
No, there's really no reason to cast a Wild Growth when your opponent's not putting any pressure on you. You can just wait until you draw an Enchantress and then cast it for a card later.
All right. The bigger problem, which he doesn't know, is that Brett Ybarra, his next draws are Thoughtseize and Cabal Therapy. So actually, I don't know if he has I don't think he has the ability. He has a Surgical Extraction in his hand. Now, that's not the card to extract here, right? It's not the Argothian Enchantress.
But he's going to do it anyway. It's an easy mistake to make when you're not familiar with exactly how the deck works. He doesn't know, for example, that Cloud of Fairies Beatdown is basically the victory route.
Right. So I mean, it's really hard. You want to Surgical Extraction is it's a very narrow card, which is very narrow when it's good to play, and when playing it, it's actually can be difficult to play correctly. On top of that,
Brett's going to look through the deck. Chris did bring in the Sphere of Safety. Interesting.
All right, Sphere of Safety. All right.
Sphere of Safety is a propaganda, but it requires your opponent to pay a mana per enchantment you control.
It's out of Return to Ravnica.
Yes, uncommon, white,
And
Selesnya
4,
style, I
right?
think.
Yep, it's a 5 mana card, correct?
Yes, it's 4 and a white. Chris can only cast it with Utopia Sprawl and his 1 Savannah.
All right. And now he's been surgically extracted once. Chris Andersen got out of that the first surgical extraction. Really kind of card disadvantage from Red Ybarra there.
Yep.
There wasn't another one in Chris's hand. Didn't really matter.
In this particular matchup, though, Brett doesn't really need to be ahead on cards. He needs to just make it impossible for Chris to actually win.
Yep. Chris drawing Utopia Sprawl, playing
Well,
land.
it
He's
looks like
gonna
he
wild
will
growth
wild
his
growth.
land. Interesting. Not positive.
I think because he drew the Sprawl, he likes this play, because now if he draws Enchantress's Presence, he can cantrip and develop his mana that way.
Vindicate and 2 1-mana discard spells. He can't like the Vindicate. The thing is that Brett doesn't actually have a way to shuffle his deck, so he's going to be stuck. He's going to be land screwed for a while here. No, sorry. He did have. He's in
has that wasteland.
I think he sees an opportunity. He's going to take a turn here to play Dark Confidant.
And
I like that.
I agree. He can untap into a Vindicate on that forest, which will throw Chris's mana right under the bus.
Yeah, if he can. I mean, he won't be getting his. He won't be getting his next land, which is probably okay.
Yeah.
Chris getting an island.
Chris really wants to hit some kind of Enchantress effect here.
Yeah,
He needs to get him.
Brett hampered most by the fact that he only has 1 black source right now. He will not be getting another one next turn. We got to be on the top of his deck, so he's not firing on all cylinders yet. Chris can, if he has an explosive enough hand, race Brett's disruption. But as soon as Brett gets that second black, Chris's resources are going to go away. Chris drawing another land, so he has 3 lands: Eternal Witness, Elephant Grass, Utopia Sprawl. Not much going on. It's Chris will play his Verdant Catacombs past the turn. Brett, no need. Yep, he already knows what's there. It's Cabal Therapy. And he knows what's in Chris's hand. You probably therapy the. Well, I don't know. You can Vindicate the land. You can therapy the Eternal Witness. Chris has a lot of mana sources at this point. I'm not sure I actually want to really therapy him.
I feel like
Vindicate the
pretty
land.
tempting.
You don't want to Vindicate the land. I would probably want to just go for the cards he has. You'd still feel like that's okay.
Ooh, that Dryad Arbor.
Dryad Arbor, surprise! You have to watch out with that fetch land, and that's pretty brutal actually.
That's good for Chris.
Yeah, you have to watch out to attack into untapped fetch land.
Chris actually added the Dryad Arbor. It was not in the original list. He liked having the ability to Green Sun Zenith on 1 as a pseudo wild growth without having to actually commit an enchantment before you could cast an Enchantress. It also opens you up to being able to do some cool stuff like turn 2 Argothian plus wild growth.
Yeah. Now this makes Brett Ybarra's play of Vindicating the land a little more tempting, except that he no longer has Inevitability.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize on Chris Andersen, so he's gonna, I think, take the Eternal Witness.
I think we're glad we didn't Vindicate the land. We just saw 2 more
Now,
and the Utopia
the
Sprawl.
biggest thing I don't like is that he's making his Cabal Therapy a really bad card here. I would have just assumed he knew the entire hand. He should have, he knew the entire hand minus Utopia Sprawl. I really think he should have therapied.
Yeah, I think especially considering we wound up taking Eternal Witness anyway, which it's fair to say I would assume we're taking Eternal Witness, as any other card we take, the Eternal Witness can just retrieve.
Right.
So.
Cloud of Fairies now in Chris Andersen's hand.
Yep. He's probably just going to want to chill for a little while. His opponent doesn't have any pressure, so he doesn't have a lot to worry about.
Yeah, the losing of the Dark Confidant, so relevant here.
Yeah. Chris is going to be not wanting to play his last land in hand, generally speaking, because of the threat of Liliana the Veil.
Spin the top. We have a Badlands, a Fetch Land. Okay, Fetch Land's going to go on top.
Fetch land will go on top and fetch the land beneath it. Probably a scrub land. And cast Liliana the Veil, I imagine.
Yep. Liliana Veil, yeah, probably.
It's not a fantastic card on this board state, I think, but
yeah, Chris
it's
with so
a
many
way
blanks
to generate some form of pressure.
Yeah, with so many blanks in his hand, Liliana the Veil, not necessarily better than a Vindicate. Vindicating, I think I favor Vindicating the land here. Liliana the Veil, I'd try to empty my hand if I were Brett, and then proceed to Liliana.
Well, our Cabal Therapy does so little now anyway.
Right. So we do have a chance to free Liliana. Yeah. I guess then you save the utility of Vindicate in case Chris has a very good draw here. Still, though, that attack really catching up with Brett Ybarra.
Yeah. I've seen a variety of creatures die to the Ninja Dryad Arbor. It's hard to see that coming.
Alright. And Liliana, the Veil comes down, she will plus.
Chris is going to discard probably the land. He could also theoretically throw one of the enchantments if he values developing his mana, but I would probably check the land. Ooh,
He's going to play
bold. He's going to cycle his Eternal Witness first.
He's cycling Cloud of Fairies.
Or sorry, Cloud of Fairies is what I meant to say.
A second Elephant Grass. Gotta dodge that Cabal Therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should shuffle that in first so that he doesn't know that you drew the Elephant Grass. Seal of Removal drawn by Chris Andersen. His deck really, like you said before, really a combo deck more than a prison deck. A lot of these draws just do nothing.
Yep. One of the nice things about the deck, however, is that the combo pieces, a lot of them are also the kill mechanisms. Like Cloud of Fairies is how you kill.
Fetchland Inquisition O-Ring is the
Many of them, like Elephant Grass and Seal of Removal, also effectively defend you until they become spells that actually enable you to win the game.
So out of Fetchland Inquisition O-Ring, I would probably draw the Fetchland. He's going to go with Inquisition. That's a fine card too.
Sure.
This
the
time,
issue is now you have to play all your spells, right?
Yeah, which is fine because he can Inquisition
Probably
one of the card.
Taking the seal here.
Doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. They're all
going to be gone. I think you leave the Elephant Grass because as soon as Chris Andersen realizes all these cards are going to be gone, well, you can't.
It's the worst one to have to cast.
Yeah, I mean you can't actually decide which one Chris is left with.
Right.
Vindicate the Forest. This game looks great for Brett Ybarra.
It looks good.
Both players discard. I think Chris gets rid of the Elephant Grass. He has to realize both cards are destined for going away, so he wants one with maybe some staying power.
Yep.
Chris draws for turn. It is
Enchantress Presence, one of the best cards.
Can't cast it fast enough.
Yeah. Enchantress Presence is an awesome spell here. The only card better would have been Argothian Enchantress, which is no longer in our deck. So.
Right. If Liliana gets to 7, Brett might make a play where he splits Enchantress's Presence and everything else.
Yeah, it's entirely reasonable. Chris cannot win without an Enchantress effect in play. It is basically impossible.
Alright. Upkeep probably Spinning Top, and he does. The double Oblivion Ring, Brett Ybarra. Yep, yeah. He'll keep that on top. And Oblivion Ring on the Enchantress's Presence. Liliana will go up to 6, and they'll discard. Brett Ybarra really in command right now.
Yeah.
Chris not even going to play for it.
Interesting. That tells me that Chris probably took out his Seal of Primordium, or at least didn't bring in the others, because I think it's pretty reasonable to think that he might be able to win from that position if he gets a seal pretty quickly.
He might be worried about time issues. They have plenty of time. The thing is that I think if he knew that Brett was going to draw another O-ring, I think Chris is pretty much dead.
Yeah.
The O-ring will take care of any combo piece. Liliana will take care of any Argothian Enchantress, and will take care of any draw. I would say his odds of winning that are 9-1.
Oh yeah, he's certainly bad off. Chris is usually a player who will sit around and wait to see if his opponent, can actually kill him, though. So that kind of makes me think he didn't have outs to the Oblivion Ring anymore. I'm not sure. I'll be interested to ask him. It looks like he's bringing in his one Verger and Enchantress, and 2 other cards. I kind of think they might be the seals.
Might be what?
The Seal of Primordiums.
Okay, so he boarded them.
He can board up to 3. I don't think you need 3. That's like too many.
Right. Having seen O-ring, I think he likes it more.
He already knows Tidehollow Sculler's a card. Now he knows O-ring's a card too.
That's enough.
Yeah, we like Seal of Primordium again.
It's fairly narrow, even when he only has that many targets. It's like at first it seems very narrow that you'd board in a card like that, but because these games are so grindy, Chris, I think he just wants cards that have utility on them. The biggest problem is he still needs to make sure that a card he's really scared of is Dark Confidant. That's the Brett card for Brett that will put the game away.
I agree. Chris boarded in his one Verger and Enchantress, which is a Living Wish target traditionally. However, against black decks or other Snapcaster decks, basically Surgical Extraction decks, it functions as a 3rd Enchantress that you can Green Sun Zenith for,
and it doesn't,
in order to avoid getting locked out.
Right. You don't want it to die. Yeah, because in case your Argothian Enchantress get extracted, you still have an Enchantress.
Now, normally I don't think it's that great if your opponent has demonstrated that their plan is to Surgical your combo pieces. But Brett went ahead and after the Argothian instead of waiting, so I think Chris assumes that's going to be generally Brett's plan in the future, and it would be nice to be able to get out of it.
Right. Especially Brett, that last time, especially with the Liliana in his hand, Argothian Enchantress, not such a threat that needs to be surgical.
Right.
double checking his sideboard, bring chance that he
Note
wants.
that he did not bring in those red blasts.
So
They're
if Chris
still
assembles
in
the
set.
combo, it'll be relatively safe.
I don't think I would bring in all of them. I might have brought in like one red blast because for Chris, that can be kind of difficult. If your opponent just has a red blast, it's a little weird to have to try and go off through Words of Wind. It's very easy to catch Chris when he's short on mana and can't actually continue comboing.
All right. So we've seen both decks kind of execute their game plans in this matchup. We originally said this was a good matchup for Chris Andersen. Still feel that way about it?
I know it's a good matchup pre-board. His opponent has a little bit more than most should post-board, I think, between the 2 Oblivion Rings, the Disenchant, the 3 Surgicals, the Zealous Persecution, even the potential blasts.
And the 2 Vindicates in the main.
Yeah, that's a lot more stuff than you usually have to get through in this matchup. But on the play, I think it probably still favors Chris because he can play an Argothian before his opponent can play a Liliana and draw some cards with it.
And here we go, a Misty Rainforest with no play for Chris Andersen. Brett Ybarra leads on Swamp with also no play, so no tops this game. Chris draws Utopia Sprawl now.
He had a Green Sun Zenith and did not play it for Dryad Arbor.
I think mana's not really his concern here. I think it's Enchantresses that's
Yeah.
kind of the bottleneck of it.
I agree.
So he'll probably wait. And he will crack his Misty Rainforest for a basic forest. Brett Ybarra does have a Wasteland, now a target for the Wasteland. I believe he has his turn 2 Dark Confidant again. As we saw though, Dark Confidant on the draw can be a little slow for this matchup.
Oh, we're about to... Oh, okay. I thought we were about to Utopia Sprawl Tropical Island, which was too bold, as they say.
Alright, so we now have an option of a turn 2 Dark Confidant or a turn 2 Him from Brett Ybarra. I have to think I like Him. There will be time for Dark Confidant. Right now I think you need to make sure, yep, Him to Tura. Could be really brutal here. 5 cards in Chris's hand. I mean, Him can always be brutal, that's why they don't print cards like that anymore.
Yeah. Got myself hemmed out of a cube match.
No 6.
Mere days ago.
5th card. And now he's going to roll a d4. 1. Green Sun Zenith. Both Green Sun Zenith. That's got to be...
That's bad. That's backbreaking. Oh, Jace, never mind. We're good.
Just kidding.
Just kidding. This guy.
And you have to, at that point, pretend like you didn't, like you had it all along.
Brett does have an Oblivion Ring, so he'll be able to answer it, but Chris, if he has access to Seal of Primordium, which is in his hand, can just get the Jace back instantly.
The second card, that is a Seal of Primordium.
It's Cloudifairy, Seal of Primordium, Wild Growth, Verdure, Enchantress, Enchantress's Presence. That's
excellent hand for Chris. And this is another situation where Jace is just going to kind of win the game. If Brett Ybarra draws a Vindicate, that would be very good.
I think I would have hidden the seal on top, probably, because I don't want my opponent being able to do something like Inquisition and then Oblivion Ring. But
I mean, the problem is to do that line of play,
you get another Jace activation. Yeah, I understand.
No.
Generally, just when I know I want a card, I like to hide it. I'm very
yeah, and if we're not for that Jace draw, I think Brett Ybarra was
far
definitely
ahead.
far ahead.
To be fair, though, Chris has a lot of cards in the deck that can accomplish the same thing. Yeah, he's got 4 Argothians, 4 Presents, a Verdurine, and 2 more Green Sun Zeniths. So that's with the Jace 14 cards that are pretty much awesome.
Well, to be fair, though, there's a Perish in Brett's hand, and there's a Bob in Brett's hand. I think Jace was kind of uniquely the man for the deal.
That's fair. Perish is an interesting choice. There really aren't that many green creatures, just the Argothians, although it is an answer to them.
Yep. Yes, that's what I believe that third card down to be. Looks like a Perish.
I imagine we're just going to go ahead and seal this Jace. I can't really see a reason to do much else. We could play the Cloudifairies to get an extra mana in order to be able to do something like seal back Jace and play Verdurine and seal back Jace, which is reasonable.
I mean, I think there's rarely something better than a Jace activation.
Sure. I think I would hold the Wild Growth if I'm Chris. We have enough mana to make this play anyway. We don't need to waste our Wild Growth.
You can get a card out of it. I mean, to be fair, though... You
can get a card of it later, yeah.
To be fair, the quality of mana may be more pressing. Just because Jace is so good at generating card advantage that it's unnecessary. Because he's going to try to...
He's just trying to generate some value here. He wants to get his Jace back and play Verdurine in the same turn.
Can he do that?
Yep. He floated a mana just now.
Okay, so he has a
with
mana
his,
floating.
Yeah. Actually, I think he has 2. But... Yeah, he'll cast Verdurn Enchantress.
It's a revised Verdurn Enchantress.
And then he'll play Seal of Primordium with an additional mana up.
It's just an Enchantress, 0-2. But here's the backbreaker is... Get ready. Not what you're going to want to see.
Chris is... I guess he may be thinking about whether he should pop it now or not. I don't know.
Pop what now?
Pop the seal now, like he could wait, but I don't think that's right at all. Like,
you draw a card off the Enchantress,
and then just get
blow
your
up
Jace
the
back.
O-ring, you know, let Jace do the Jace thing.
He still has... Oh, he was thinking about what mana to float, whether it should be blue or green, because he's going to brainstorm and hope to hit another 1-mana enchantment. So it's always green in this situation, for the record. Like, I don't think... unless you have knowledge of a seal of removal, you have to name green, and I assume that's what Chris named. Now, because he knows about Vindicate, he doesn't want to commit too many wild growths to that forest, but he also knows about Wastelands. So he can't really commit wild growths to that tropical island either. I think I would hold. Yep, that's what he's going to do. And Brett's gone from being pretty far ahead to pretty far behind.
Yeah, I mean, there's that Jace is really the game here.
He's a powerful planeswalker. Quite the magician. He's better at Magic than I am, that's for sure. He's certainly won more games.
That's for sure.
He's only been playing for like 2 years too. That's
yeah, no, quick.
He's
a quick read.
He's quick. Yeah. He's not the only player who's been playing for a short period of time and won more games than Glenn Jones, though.
Oh. It's a very sad tale. I like how he has multiple professions now as well. So, you know, he's the mind sculptor and the memory adept and the architect of thought.
I've had a few professions myself.
Yeah.
I think
he doesn't seem to keep one
par.
job. Doesn't keep one job too long.
That's fair. 2 confidants. That's a lot of confidant.
Yeah. Almost. 2 confidants almost generates as much card advantage as Jace does.
Almost. Not quite.
The bigger problem here is Chris Andersen is very close to simply assembling the combo.
Yeah. He really just
needs
a
really big forest.
A couple pieces.
More Enchantresses.
I imagine now we're just going to pay 5 and cast
2 more Enchantresses.
The Argothian and the Presence seems correct here. It would be a real folly if he went Argothian and then Zenith to try and extract full value on the next turn, because that Perish would blow him out. He's going to cast the Argothian. Oh, he's bouncing his Cloud. Oh, that's a play. Yeah, that's a good play. Whoops. Yeah. I missed that one.
Does that draw more or less cards than a Brainstorm? That probably draws more cards than a Brainstorm.
It draws, I think, about the same if he casts the Zenith. Or does he have a mana floating? Yeah. He can cast the Zenith for an Argothian and then play Presence to draw 3 cards.
Sure. He's going to go Presence. Yeah, Presence first
just
to draw
Presence?
2.
That's interesting.
And he's drawn Words of Wind, so...
If he has... I believe he has enough mana floating to cast that. I am not 100% though. There's also some merit to declining to risk playing it to lose it to Vindicate Surgical Extraction, but I don't like that. Yep. Draw 3. Oh, Seal of Removal. It's a handy one. We can play one of the other ones. I think the Seal's probably correct. Oh, we have a land for the turn.
And at this point, the combo is going.
No, we are, unless I'm not sure of what mana we have floating. I don't think we have any.
Okay, if we have none,
we have none, we can't really do anything else from this point. We're 1 mana shy of maybe doing some cool things. But next turn, we should be fully firing. Even through a Perish, I think we're fine.
Well, yeah, none of our combo pieces actually died to Perish. Well, one of our we'd be 1 Enchantress short.
We'd be 1 Enchantress short, but we can bounce the Verdurn Enchantress with Seal or Removal and go back to where we need to be. The biggest concern is a potential Vindicate on that forest would be really bad.
And 3 lands for Brett Ybarra.
Disenchant on Words of Wind will break it up as well, if Brett points it that way.
Yep. I mean, granted, Jace will do a great job of just finding another.
That's true.
I think Brett Ybarra knows he's in a pretty rough spot right here.
Yeah, I think he has to just disenchant here. But Chris does have a Green Sun Zenith. The Green Sun Zenith will certainly just go for Eternal Witness, get back the Words of Wind, and back to the races.
Yep, disenchant on... He disenchants the Words of Wind and casts Perish.
Yep. This might be enough to stop Chris from comboing this turn. Having to replace a second Enchantress effect and his Words of Wind all in one turn is pretty mana intensive. He may not be able to do it.
The biggest issue is still, and well, what is still, well, actually he can force him. He can kill the Jace. If he swings, he's going to swing both creatures
Sure.
at Jace.
Oh no, I assume he's going to kill that Jace.
Yeah. Unless, well, Chris can use a Seal of Removal on a Dark Confidant, which he probably will do. If he would you trade Cloud of Fairies and use Seal of Removal?
If I don't think I'm going to combo kill my opponent on the next turn or semi-combo kill them, then yes, but it's
my hunch is that you're
going
to combo kill them.
It's also worth noting that with a Jace in play, you can use that to do Words of Wind as well, as long as you have cards in hand to throw away.
And he doesn't attack and kill the Jace, he just says, go. Ooh. That should be...
I think Brett might think his Dark Confidants are better than Chris's Jace.
Well, Jace, I think you just brainstorm Jace and replace your 3 draws with Words of Wind.
Yeah.
You witness back Words of Wind. I mean, yeah, that's probably how you start it.
As well. Yeah. That's a 7 mana Words of Wind, but a bargain at that rate. We may want to seal back our Cloud of Fairies first. I, in fact, think that we probably need to, but. Nah, we're just going to go with the Green Sun Zenith. It's possible he's just going to go get another Enchantress and keep drawing. Yep, that's what he's doing. Okay.
All right, and at this point, it seems very hard for Chris to lose from this situation.
I agree.
So the Dark Confidants, both interesting enough, in both of Brett's losses, he's had double Dark Confidants. They really, while good, they're the late game card. They don't take the early game.
I mean, they're also fully dependent on how good they are. You know, if you're not drawing the right cards, then they're not going to work. Wild Growth on Forest for 2 cards. We hit a Cloud of Fairies. Oh, we might be off.
Well, certainly we have a lot of mana at this point.
Now Chris is just going to want to draw as many cards as he can before using Cloud of Fairies to reset and then probably evaluate from there.
Well, really neat deck for Chris. So let's talk a little bit about Chris's Enchantress deck. What are the matchups that it doesn't want to see?
I found Goblins to be kind of difficult. You can dodge Wasteland, obviously, as a result of having so many basics, but sometimes you can't. It's frequent that you have to search up a Tropical Island to do some things, so that's kind of a problem. War and Weirding of the Black-Red Goblins deck is really annoying for Argothian Enchantress specifically. And the other big problem is Rashada and Port locks down your Wild Growth lands during your upkeep, which is not a very useful time to have Wild Growth lands.
So Port is actually seems to be very dangerous for
Port's very dangerous. So Goblins, and I imagine Dead Gael, although I haven't played that archetype, I imagine it has
You imagine this is a bad matchup?
Sorry, not Dead Gael. I meant to say Death and Taxes. So many fatal beginnings to these decks.
Sure.
Death and Taxes is probably also tough for very similar reasons.
Now, and I imagine also opposing combo decks is rather rough.
Some opposing combo decks are. I board a bunch of Mindbreak traps on Moto because that's like a pretty real concern. Chris, it looks like, is running just the Force of Wills instead.
I suppose I'm talking particularly about, so for example, we have knocking on the door for top 8, Jerry Thompson's playing Dredge.
Yeah, Dredge can be tough. You're comboing circa the turn they're comboing. It's not like really close. They're usually like turn 3 to 4. You're like a hard turn 4.
You're a hard turn 4. I mean,
they're a little more fragile.
But they're therapying you on the way to their combo kill sometimes, or they're disrupting you.
Sure, but the issue is that like your primary form of delay is actually Elephant Grass. I think. I believe Jerry actually beat Chris in this tournament.
Okay,
so I think Dredge is definitely ahead in the matchup, but it is winnable. I think the Enchantress player really needs to be on the play to win it. And also, like, having Graveyard Hate is a plus. Chris doesn't actually have any, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so no Rest in Pieces.
Yeah. Rest in Peace is a back-breaking play for anyone against Dredge, and it's especially good in Enchantress.
So for those of you, we kind of have turned off on the game. Chris Andersen currently doing the combo kill again.
He has Eternal Witness back his Words of Wind, and he can now generate... He actually, as he's generating more than 5 mana from 2 lands, he can generate infinite mana with this loop. And he can also, if he plays a 3rd Enchantress effect, begin drawing his entire deck.
Yes.
That's probably not going to be necessary, but he may do it anyway. It's pretty fun.
Sure. once you can do whatever you want, it's really fun. Yep, 2 more. Sure. Cloud of Fairies. Add some more mana. Brett Ybarra electing to play this out.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well let your opponent Emrakul you on camera if you're going to get Emrakuled. Or perhaps Chris will force him down the dishonorable path of Cloud of Fairies beatdown. I actually don't run the Emrakul on Moto. I've been running the Seal of Fire because it kills Aetherstone Canonist, which is a little more obnoxious a card and shows up much more frequently in Moto decks than it does in real life.
Right.
Because of the proliferation of combo. The Moto metagame is very funny actually in Legacy because Force of Will is so expensive that combo decks are thus better choices.
Really good. Yeah.
Charbelcher is a mediocre real-life choice, but a pretty reasonable one on Moto. And to all you Charbelcher fanatics out there, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just speaking the truth. It's not that good.
If you run good, it's the best deck in Legacy.
If you run good, it is the best deck in Legacy. That's
Yep.
true. If you win every die roll and kill every opponent on turn 1 and they don't have Force of Will, I think you'll win every game.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
mean,
think? You think you got them all?
some of these decks, if you run good, it's totally unstoppable. All right, well, all of Brett Ybarra continuing to play, all of his cards are in his hand.
Yeah. Chris
The biggest, I mean, one of the biggest problems you have is that so Chris has infinite mana and infinite and he has extra bounces. So now he can also bounce his own Eternal Witness, put his entire graveyard into his hand, play an Enchantress, then draw his entire deck, then draw his Living Wish and Emrakul Brett. That's a line to win.
Yep.
Like where I'm playing, I would just say that aloud to my opponent and say, do you have any responses? And then I ask please do that. He'll ask me to do that line and be like, well, okay. Right.
Amusingly, it's actually easier to just cast enchantments until you find the enchantment, just because it's easier to explain to your opponent.
Yeah, I'll just show you. I'll just show you what I'm going to do. This is over, but I'll show you.
We're going to play Nargothian, play a Seal.
So I think at this point, he's already said he's generated infinite mana. So
yeah.
that's his opponent scoops away the dice. It's understood that Chris has all the mana he wants.
Yep. I have 100 blue. And I think he actually has to have slightly less blue than green, to be fair. So you have infinite green, and then 80% of infinite blue.
So some of the things I like doing is instead of choosing infinite in these decks, to just choose like reasonably sized numbers. Be like, I have 80 blue mana and 120 green. And be like, oh, okay, you could run out. No, I can't.
No. I think it looks like on each iteration he has to generate 2 blue for every however many for 4 green. So yeah, he has to have
That's
about
Living
half
Wish
as
he's
many.
getting?
Yep, Living Wish. After he draws his deck.
Emrakul, I will hit you.
He'll play Emrakul, and during his upkeep, he's going to be activating Words of Wind to avoid dying to decking.
Yes. I can't deck, I have Words of Wind. All right. Ready with the concession. Chris Andersen wins 2-1 over Brett Ybarra.
One of the more amusing things you can do with infinite mana is, Jace a bunch with Words of Wind. Once you have infinite mana, Jace can...
You can Jace, bouncing Jace, recast Jace.
Jace, bouncing Jace, recast Jace.
Wow.
This is not a trick I've gotten to do on Moto, like many of the tricks that this deck can do.